In this video, we will show you how to replace your vehicle's alternator on this Dodge Ram 1500 with a 5.2-liter engine. This will be mounted along the front of your engine. Let's get into it. On the driver's side of the engine compartment, we're going to locate the battery and disconnect the negative battery terminal. To disconnect the negative battery terminal, we'll be focusing on the 13mm nut. For this, you need to only loosen it enough that you can take hold of the terminal end, give it a wiggle, and remove it from the battery. A quick inspection of the terminal end to confirm it's still in good, usable condition. This looks fine, we'll set it aside. Let's start removing the serpentine belt from the area. Before you do so, pay attention to the belt routing. Take quick note of that. Continuing on from there, we're going to make our way down at the tensioner. We'll use a 15mm and turn this center bolt clockwise. That'll release tension from the serpentine belt, and we'll pull the serpentine belt out and away from the alternator pulley. You can use a serpentine belt tool or just a 15mm wrench. It really shouldn't require very much pressure. Now, once you have the belt off of those pulleys, you just want to take a quick inspection. If it looks like it's cracked or damaged in any way, or it looks like it's worn, you want to go ahead and replace the serpentine belt. After looking at this belt, it looks as though it's still in good reusable condition. Let's continue on. Now we can start removing the alternator from this area. There's going to be several things that we'll have to dislodge. Up along the top, we want to remove the mounting nut that's holding our AC lines in place. They should be able to move around a little bit, not very much, because these are actually solid lines leading over to the AC compressor. You're going to find that you have a 14mm headed mounting bolt. Now we can lift this up and down. As I said, you don't want to lift and twist it too much. We don't want to cause any damage. Let's move along from there to our dipstick tube. If you were to follow the dipstick tube down along the side of the alternator on the bracket itself, you're going to find a 13mm headed mounting bolt holding this in place. We'll remove that. Now up along the top of the alternator, you're going to find a 10mm headed mounting nut holding this wiring harness in place. Before we continue disconnecting anything else along the back side of the alternator, let's dislodge the alternator so we can more easily gain access. You're going to find that you have a 14mm headed mounting bolt up along the top here. Just a quick inspection of that mounting bolt. I'm going to start it back in just a couple threads. Now for the lower piece of mounting hardware, you're also going to find that you have a 14mm headed mounting nut on the back side of that mounting bolt. We'll use a 14 wrench on the back side there and a 14mm for the bolt head on the front. We'll remove that mounting bolt. Now we can move up to that upper mounting bolt, fully remove that, dislodge the alternator, gain access to the backside. As you can tell, the upper bolt is considerably shorter than the lower mounting bolt. It's just something to take note of. Now we can see along the backside of the alternator we have our large power wire, and we also have two more wires leading down in this area. Let's start with the two small mounting nuts there. We're using a 7mm. Of course, it is a good idea to use some penetrant in this area if necessary. These are very small. Take care not to lose them. Typically, your new alternator will come with some new mounting hardware. There's the next one. Once again, very small. Now that we have those two off of there, let's continue following downward on the alternator here. You're going to find one more piece of 10mm mounting hardware down on that lower corner. We can remove that. Now we should be able to take hold of this area and we can gently pull it away from the alternator. A close inspection, we'll set this aside. Now let's focus on the larger power wire. You can see that right in between these two AC lines. To remove this wire from the back side of the alternator, I'm going to be using a 10mm here as well. Just give that wire a little wiggle, try to pull it out of place. Quick inspection of the wire. We will clean up all the wiring before we install the alternator. Now we can start removing the alternator. Go ahead and take hold of that, and we're going to carefully slide it out of here, being extremely careful not to cause any damage to anything. Now, before you can install your alternator, the next thing we want to do is pay attention to all of the wiring harnesses and their connectors. Confirm that the wiring harnesses are still in good usable condition. As far as the connectors, you want to make sure you clean down the mating surface on the outside and the inboard side, which will be directly up against the terminals on the alternator. I'm just going to use some fine sandpaper for this and essentially make sure it's a nice smooth mating surface. And now we'll just do the same to all the rest here. Okay friends, let's install our alternator. We'll get this into position. We'll start with the wiring harnesses along the back side. Just have to slide it in here, flex things as needed. Now as far as the wiring harnesses, let's start with the one with the field wires on it here. We want to make sure we have each one of those terminal ends sitting over each one of the terminals as they should. Double check down along the bottom there. We'll start swinging it in. There's the two small field wires. We'll just start on the two mounting nuts, but leave those loose for now. Once again, we're only leaving these loose so we can flex this around as necessary for the next two terminal ends. You can see the one up along the top there. Just try to press that on. Start on the piece of mounting hardware, but leave that loose as well. We'll continue on down to the bottom. Now, when you snug these up, you want to be extremely careful. For the two smaller studs here, it's very easy to break these on the backside of the alternator, in which case you have to replace the alternator. Once you have these bottomed out, the torque for them is 25 inch-pounds. Okay, right there is bottomed out. We're not going to go any further than that. We'll make sure we torque it properly. Let's get the next one snugged up as well real quick. Now I've got my inch-pound torque wrench. We're going to torque these to 25 inch-pounds like I mentioned. It's very little. Now it's time for the two 10mm headed mounting nuts along the backside here. Once we have those snug, we're going to torque those to 75 inch-pounds. Now it's time for the large power wire. We'll get this in position. If you were looking at the alternator, you're going to find that it has a plastic housing. That wiring harness should be able to slide right up inside the groove, up along the top area. After you have that pressed into position, go ahead and start on the mounting nut, snug it up, torque that to 75 inch-pounds. Okay. Just double check, make sure all that's nice and tight. Now we can get the alternator in position. Now when we bring this in, as you remember, the upper mounting bolt for the hardware here was shorter than the lower mounting bolt. So we'll just go ahead and start that upper mounting bolt in, couple threads. With that started in, we can continue on down along the bottom with the longer of the two mounting bolts. Should be able to maneuver this around as necessary. For each of these bolts, you want to go ahead and bottom them out. Make sure they're snug. The torque for these is 30 foot-pounds. As for the bottom mounting bolt, we'll make sure we start that mounting nut along the back side as well here. We're going to hold that in place with our 14mm wrench. We have our mounting bolt for the dipstick tube. Go ahead and start that in, snug it up. Now up along the top, we have our next mounting nut. This one holds the AC lines down. Let's tighten that up. It's time to reinstall the serpentine belt over each one of the pulleys. As far as the ribbed pulleys, you want to make sure you're sitting into each of the grooves properly. If you're off by even one tooth on the serpentine belt in comparison to the grooves on the pulley, you could cause damage to the serpentine belt and possibly other parts as well. In the center of the tensioner, we're going to turn this clockwise, releasing pressure here. Be careful for any pinch points. One more confirmation right along this area. We're confirming that we are properly seated. I can see on the idler pulley here, right in the center, the belt's actually ready to walk off of there. It's a good thing we caught this. Let's go ahead and release pressure from the serpentine belt. We'll readjust this and double check one more time before starting the vehicle. Let's reconnect the negative battery terminal. Before we do so, we want to make sure we clean the terminal end on the battery itself and the end on the cable. Just using a battery terminal cleaner here. Now we'll be using our brush on the inside of this. This will make sure that we have great contact to that battery. Let's go ahead and press this all the way down there as far as possible. Continuing with our 13mm, we're going to tighten that mounting nut. Give that a wiggle, confirming it's properly secured in place. Okay friend, we finished the installation of our serpentine belt tensioner. The next thing you need to do is make your way into the passenger compartment. You start up the vehicle, let it run for approximately 5 seconds and turn it right back off. Make your way back out here and you're going to triple check the belt. It's extremely important to make sure it's properly seated on each and every one of the pulleys. After that, and you've confirmed it looks as though it should, go ahead and close the hood and take your vehicle for a road test. Thanks for watching.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.